wheelchair the rest of your life.
That's right.
Correct. And then
Yep, and not only in a wheelchair, not only can I walk, but a quadriplegic, very limited use of my hands. No use of my hands. It's my shoulder that drives my wheelchair.
what did you think about your future?
Well, first of all, I thought, dear Lord, thank you for not letting my head get hit. I'm sure I was 2 inches from a brain injury.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that would be even more frustrating than the frustration. At least I've got my mental faculties, and I can come up with the coping skills that I need.
The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.
Hello, West Michigan. This is Grandtapmedia Business TV. My name is Pamela Keim, your host. The spirit of the show is to introduce West Michigan to all the businesses, individuals, nonprofits that can help us thrive in our lives. We have a very special guest for you today. Many of you might have already heard of her, or have heard her name, or even heard of the nonprofit that she founded for 20 years now. We want to welcome to the show is Mary Kay Hoodhood, and she is here to talk about what inspired her to start Kids Food Basket, which many people are aware of, like myself, who's gone to fundraising and raised money for the nonprofit. And she has her new book called What I Can Do, and she's going to be sharing her inspiration story, and maybe she'll inspire you. But we want to welcome to the show Mary Kay, and she is Hoodhood, and she's going to share how her suffering inspired her to help others.
I don't know about suffering. I'd rather laugh.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, Mary Kay. What would you, do people call you Mary Kay?
Yeah, because I went to Catholic school and there were so many Marys. So I always go by Mary Kay.
Well, and I know that we know a lot of people in the community because you have raised a lot of money for Kids Food Basket.
Oh, yeah.
And there's been, and we're going to share a little bit more about that. But anyways, the reason I have you on your show is you wrote your memoir about that inspiration to do that and what that organization has done in our community. So share with us a little bit, who is Mary Kay Hoodhood, and a little bit about the book you inspired. I know we're going to do this in part 2 and the Food Basket, but I want to share a little bit about you.
Okay.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you. So I was born here in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And I grew up on the north end of town. I'm the youngest of 6 children. I have 4 older brothers, and my sister was the oldest. She's since passed away. My mom and dad were wonderful, wonderful, giving, community-oriented people.
Well, you did mention, I did read that, and
Yeah.
I did read that about
Yeah.
that, and I was like, you came from a large family, right? And you were raised in kind of the Ozzie and Harriet kind of, I think a lot of us were.
Yes. It was a different day than it is now. My dad was a lawyer and belonged to the Elks Club and many other service clubs. And my mother was a troop leader, for Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. And they helped with the parish picnic and just all the stuff. They really led by example. And I always feel that that's the way that I lead too. That I show people this is what you need to do to help your neighbor. So
you were raised in giving back to the community already. Now share with us, and as everybody can see that you are in a wheelchair, and you probably, I understand when I said suffering, but there is a lot of people in the community that are suffering. They don't think they can really do anything.
Oh, I know, it's hard.
So I kind of want to, I know you had a great childhood, so let's move forward into what happened
1980.
here. Yes.
So after I was 27 years old. So after I grew up here, went to college, went to Michigan State, graduated, came back to Grand Rapids sometime later. I stayed in Lansing and worked for many years. Came back to Grand Rapids, met my now husband, then boyfriend.
Okay.
And we were engaged. I was 27 years old. And we were going up to camp at Silver Lake up north of Muskegon.
Okay, yes.
For Memorial Day weekend. So a lot of people on the road. There was no drinking or drugs involved. And we were on a very flat area. And my husband Jeff's daughter, her name is Melissa. She's 5 years old. She was on my lap. And we were sort of falling asleep. Jeff was driving. And sadly, a little boy ran out into the traffic. He was running to go to his mailbox. And he ran right into the car. Jeff swerved. A Bronco got us and we went rolling. Sad, the little boy was killed. And the car was crushed around me. And so Jeff and Melissa were throwing. And so they're looking around, and then when the cops came, they couldn't even find me. I was crushed in that car. So they took like 2 hours in the jaws of life to get me out of there. So now they've got me and they take me to Hackley Hospital. And they said that I was too serious. So they brought me to Blodgett. And I was there for 3.5 months.
So you wake up, I mean, you were aware that this was happening to you or not?
Nope, I blacked out. God does a really wonderful thing for me when it's trauma like that. I blacked out and I woke up 2 days later in the hospital.
And you're laying there in the hospital. Did you sense that there was something wrong?
I knew there was something wrong because I had a tracheotomy. So now I can't talk because I was on a breathing machine.
Okay.
I'm in a bed that they've since don't use anymore. It was called a road arrest bed and it turned back and forth. It was to try to keep your bodily fluids moving. I woke up in that bed, didn't know what was going on.
Did you understand the severity of your injury? Did you realize that you were going to be
Well,
a different person from that day forward?
No kidding. I surely understood that I couldn't get up out of bed like I could every other day.
And what awareness did that give you? It's like we all take those things for granted. And then here you are laying in this bed, 27-year-old beautiful woman, just, you know, with your fiance.
Right, well, he was in the hospital at Hackley, so he wasn't there.
Okay, he wasn't there, so
My
not
mother,
aware that he was
my mother was there. My dad had already passed away a couple of years earlier.
And so what were they telling you, that this is something this is what your life was going to be? Was
Yep.
that quickly
Yep,
told
they're
you
in
right
there.
away?
Yep, they're in there. I ran into the doctor that was my doctor now. I don't know if he was the original one that told me what had happened, what my life was going to be like. But I ran into him like 5 years ago, and I said, Dr. Dugan, I can't believe I'm still alive.
Was he surprised too?
Well, and he had to remind me who he was, because I didn't remember.
Right.
No, he said, you were always very strong. And he said, those nurses loved you. I said, they did?
I know, you're just trying. Were you in pain?
No.
Okay, so you weren't in pain, and you just had to go through rehab, and they're telling you the bad news that you're going to be in a wheelchair the rest of your life.
That's right.
Correct. And then
Yep, and not only in a wheelchair, not only can I walk, but a quadriplegic, very limited use of my hands. No use of my hands. It's my shoulder that drives my wheelchair.
what did you think about your future?
Well, first of all, I thought, dear Lord, thank you for not letting my head get hit. I'm sure I was 2 inches from a brain injury.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that would be even more frustrating than the frustration. At least I've got my mental faculties, and I can come up with the coping skills that I need to get through the day.
Yes, that would be. And then, so you're what? How do you see your future? Obviously, it was wonderful. You and your husband, current husband, get married, and what do you do with your life from there?
That's right, exactly. That I had to come up with a whole new dream. You know, I mean, I'm 27 years old. I'm engaged.
You're right.
I have I'm college educated.
Correct.
I had a bright future, and that was all gone. The one thing is, though, I knew he would never leave me.
Jeff or God? Did
Both.
God play to play?
Yeah, I'm done. Well, God, we all know, will never leave
Right.
us.
But a lot of people are unaware of that when they're gone through something tragic, especially in your situation where you had this promising future, you have everything going for you, and all of a sudden now you're in a wheelchair.
Yep.
And that must have been.
And not only in a wheelchair, but I need every help to do anything at all, except think. I can still think. I can still enjoy things. I can still go to the movies with you and we can both laugh at the same thing.
That is.
But that's why the name of the book is What I Can Do.
Yes, and we're going to be talking about this wonderful book, What I Can Do.
Yes, and that's what it is, because when I was working with Lisa, the wonderful co-author, she would always say, well, what about this or what about that? And I said, I had to concentrate on what I could do and what I still can do.
Well, isn't that
not
what
my
you know,
old life, my new life.
Well, your new life, and I think a lot of people not as similar, not the same as being, put in a situation like yourself there, but about when tragedy hits them. Maybe they lose a spouse, they lose a child, they use, things don't work out the way we planned.
I know.
And when you looked around and you saw, let's move forward a little bit now that we have your backstory, you're volunteer, you have to do something. You realize you have all this time, like we all realize, 24 hours a day. How can I now contribute to society? That's right. And you said that, let's start with the story is now that you move forward as you're at God's kitchen, right? Correct?
Yeah, and I got there because I had a nun that was bringing me communion. And I said, sister, if there's ever any volunteer activity I can do on the phone, let me know. She came back the next week and hooked me up with people at God's Kitchen. So I was there volunteering many, many, many years. Then they got a new director, and I was pretty much running the Meals on Wheels program. And she knew, she said, because I was getting disability from the federal government.
Okay.
She said, well, you can still work part-time and not jeopardize your disability money. So I did that, and then as time went on, I gave up my disability status, stayed at God's Kitchen for several years, running the Meals on Wheels program and all the volunteers and everything. And then I got a job offer from Disability Advocates. So I left God's Kitchen, but that's right the time that we started feeding the kids.
All right, let's talk about that. This is what where people learn about Kids Food Basket.
Yeah.
I will tell you that it's been around, like I didn't realize it's been around 20 years, but I go to many fundraising events in the community and a lot of people raise money for Kids Food Basket, and we are part of one of them, the purse auction from Women's Life. That's done that, and then I know I've been at golf outings where the proceeds went to the Kids Food Basket. So let's talk about how that all came about, because here you are.
Also the proceeds from this book go to Kids Food Basket.
All the proceeds from this book goes to the Kids Food Basket. Yeah. And many people might know of the the nonprofit, but maybe they don't know what it's actually who's the people behind it, how it started, and what it really does in the community. They may see it on billboards and they might see it at fundraising, but until you hear about this inspiration of how this started.
So I was working at God's Kitchen, and we were delivering groceries as adjacent to the regular meals that the people received, because we knew there was a lot of people that were trying to stretch the noontime meal that they got Monday through Friday to be all the food they had. So we were packing groceries, and a woman named Patty said to me, when I'm leaving here, I'm going over to Straight School because the principal there, her name is Mary Ann Przyshenko, she caught a little girl digging through the trash, looking for food for her family. And so Mary Ann said to her, asked her what she was doing. She said, I need some food. My family doesn't have any food. Well, Mary Ann was, of course, very upset by that.
Correct.
I met her 2 months later, and she said that she had done her due diligence, and by the time I met her, between 3 schools on the near west side of Grand Rapids, principals and administrators could pinpoint 125 kids that they knew were at high risk of not receiving an evening meal.
They already, in schools, they do provide a breakfast for some of these.
And lunch.
And lunch. So then here's a child, here's some children. I'm like, when you're looking at food, and that's on your mind all the time, it makes it very difficult to learn.
That's right.
And you realize you're going to go home and you might have hungry siblings that are
Yes.
dealing with the same thing. And so they're like, okay, the little girl probably thought, if I bring some food home, you know, you could eat it in your room or something
That's
like that.
right.
You won't be hungry.
I know.
And we can't even imagine that. You and I, you lived in kind of an Aussie area kind of
Yes.
community. Where is this? And so what was the school's plan? What was their idea before?
Well, her plan was to get the resources to find a group to feed the kids. But she'd been looking for 2 months. She said, you know, people were willing to maybe do like, you know, so little after school food, but milk and cookies isn't cutting it. And a lot of these kids go home, they might eat chips or cookies for dinner.
Well, they're growing.
Yeah,
They
and
played all
that's,
day, right?
yeah, and all they can think about is food.
Well, and that's what we did too, but we never went
Well,
to the
no, but we
refrigerator.
went home and there was food, right?
Right, we never had to worry about that. And that's one thing about growing up in a very middle class or blue collar, as I called it back in the day. We never had to worry about, we maybe didn't know where maybe it wasn't the top notch, but it was food, right?
Well, we weren't concerned because we knew there'd be a meal on the table.
There was dinner every night, and there was breakfast, and we all packed our own lunches. There was just a different life for us.
Yes, right.
All right, so you hear the story, and your first thought is?
I better go meet Mary Ann. So I go over and meet Mary Ann, and she tells me the whole story and said she just couldn't find anybody. So I very determinedly, that's not even a word, I was determined to go back down and explain to the people at God's Kitchen how important this was. So this was the fall of 2001, right after the terrorist attack in New York.
9/11, yeah. That changed
It was that month. And I said to them, I was talking to the principal at Strait School, told him what happened, and said, we need to feed these children. And they said, there's no money to do that, we won't do that.
Why do you think did they feel like it should be picked up by somebody else, or?
Yeah, they felt like they couldn't take on that task.
Well, I could imagine. It was,
Yeah, sure. Well, I didn't feel like that though. I went home and I couldn't sleep thinking about kids going to bed hungry.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went back the next day and I said, you cited that the money was the main problem. So if I raise the money, can I do it? I don't think they wanted to make me mad. Yeah, I don't think they wanted to tangle with that. So they said, all right. So I went and met with a couple people, and I started out with $1,000. And then someone else gave me $1,000, and then the original Armin-O-Median, who was my sister-in-law's dad, gave me another $1,000. So $3,000.
That's how you started Kids Food Basket? Was $3,000, which is?
Yeah, of course, we don't have to mention, God's Kitchen facility. They had extra bread so we could make sandwiches. And we went for not a hot meal, a portable meal. Just because kids, sometimes they go to their grandma's after school. They go home, there's no one there. So we wanted something they could take with them wherever they went.
Well, travel, and some kids may eat in their room. They
Right.
may not have the family structure as you
Right,
and I grew up
right,
with,
yeah.
that they may be eating in their room, but knowing that they could reach down and get a bag and eat some food at 7 o'clock at night
Yeah.
or something. You understand that.
So we always gave a piece of fruit and a sandwich and maybe a granola bar or some of those old cheese and cracker stuff.
So how many students did you actually start out with?
We started with 125.
From Strait School or from
No,
other
they were
schools?
from Harrison, Strait, and Sibley.
Okay.
3 schools.
And that's a Grand Rapids public school?
Grand Rapids
Okay.
Public.
Did you, I know a lot of people that always ask, did you guys try to figure out why this was happening to these
Well,
these
at this point,
children?
we did. And my immediate response was, well, if they're being neglected, their parents need to be reported.
Well, I would think, but it doesn't change the fact that we need to create a process in which to help
Right.
these kids to avoid this problem. And
Right.
but they still need to get fed Monday every night.
That's
you know,
right.
You can't
And
wait
we're
3
doing-
months.
At this point now that Kids Food Basket's at, we're involved in all that. What's going on? Why is it happening? How can we change the cycle? So we're doing all that now, working with many different organizations.
What are you noticing most that was causing the situation where a child needs to have your services?
Well, I'll tell you what, when we first started and we did any investigating at all, it was that the wages of 2 parents wasn't enough to stretch to feed their families. You know, and people have heating bills that are higher than ours.
Right.
Cars that are not as reliable. So, you know, we're
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what it is today. And
they
I can
just didn't
see
have
where
it in their budget.
their budget
Yeah.
and parents having, and sometimes when we looked at poverty, I worked in the aging network, and we're dealing with seniors,
Yes.
which I probably talked to you on the phone. But anyways, the whole thing is seniors were living in older homes, which their heat was costing them more.
Exactly.
There was just, they couldn't afford the windows.
Yeah,
You
the
see where
budgets
it's
are different,
tripling,
right, yeah,
going down.
yeah.
And what happened was that they were skimping on food to pay their electric bill and gas
That's
bill.
right.
But normally it wouldn't be if they lived in a better, they had insulation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And when you're in poverty, sometimes you are in housing that isn't giving you the best
That's
use
right.
of your
That's
resources.
exactly the problem.
Yes. All right. So Kids Food Basket's been around for 20 years. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about where you're at today.
Yeah, so that, when I was feeding kids out of God's Kitchen, I called that the pilot program, because we didn't even have our own 501c3 or a name. So in that spring, that's when I was going to change jobs. So I ran into George Hartwell, the former mayor
Yes.
of Grand Rapids.
Yes.
And he was in the community leadership. He was a professor in the community leadership program at Aquinas. And I ran into him, I said, I need an intern. Told him what we were doing. And he said, great. He introduced me to Bridget Clark Wheaton when it was Bridget Clark at the time. And so we took that first summer off. We feed kids in the summer now, but we didn't then. Took that summer off, and then in the fall, Bridget started. And we took on a few more schools. And that's when we had our own 501c3 and named the program.
Right. You have a new bill. It was a few years back, probably before the pandemic
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
COVID.
Yeah, it's been about 4 years.
Right. And for many people, if we didn't make clear what Kids Food Basket does, is that your volunteers, you make them like a sandwich, and
Yeah.
they have like an apple, some fruit, a vegetable,
Yep.
and they put it in a sack lunch,
Yep.
and then it goes to the schools, and then they're able to, the
And-
teachers decide if the kids need it. Is that how that works still?
In different schools do it different ways.
Okay, volunteers.
Families can opt in or out of the program, or the teacher will identify that the kid needs it.
Okay.
And then the teacher hands them out at the end of the day.
And you started off with what, 100 and, from what I understand, 150 kids, 100
We
kids?
started 125, and then by the end of that year was 150, then the next year was 250, and now it's 10,000.
So 10,000 students are receiving a sack lunch to
Sack
take
supper,
home because
yeah,
they're
it's
not
a
meeting,
supper.
their parents aren't meeting
Yeah,
their
it's our evening meal, so it's a sack supper.
sack supper. Okay. And they're able to do that. And then we're in the growth of Kids Food Basket. Is it still predominantly all volunteers, from what I understood?
Oh yeah, we have a lot of volunteers. We have about 200 volunteers a day. But we also are feeding kids in Muskegon and Holland.
Now, are you guys bringing the food from the Grand Rapids area to that, or you have another facility set up
We
there?
have 3 facilities. And the one that's in Holland is in the south part of Ottawa County. So we feed kids in northern Allegan County also.
I'm sure the need is so great now with
Yeah,
you
and
know
we-
what's happening in our economy after
Right.
whatever. I couldn't even imagine some parents are working 2 to 3 jobs, and whatever your assessment of the situation is, something about the parents or the community, the child still has to have food. and until we figure out a process in which to avoid this,
Yeah.
what do? Right?
You feed kids, right?
You feed kids, so you're just trying to, but your organization now is trying to create a process in which, maybe you can go to leaders and other nonprofits and stuff that we're saying, okay, how can we avoid this child in 5 years being without, correct?
Right. And also we have farms at 2 of our locations. So we do an education piece where we bring kids in. So with Kids Food Basket, there's 3 or 4 things I'm very proud of. One of them is that that 1/3 of our volunteers are under 18 years old.
Oh, okay.
So we have lots of kids helping kids. Another one is that we provide a fruit and a vegetable every day. And the third one is that 78% of the kids that we feed and their families have had a chance to volunteer.
That is wonderful. And
that doesn't happen usually.
Now, as we wrap this interview up, and we are going to do part 2 on talking about your book, even though we did mention in this interview, but I want to learn more about your book and where people can get it. How can West Michigan, as we're looking at the camera here, Mary Kay, is that how can the community get involved and where can they donate and learn more about what
Right, we have
Kids Food Basket?
on the internet, kidsfoodbasket.org, or call and tell them you want to talk to one of the volunteer coordinators. But you can go online and get the whole list of volunteer opportunities.
On the web?
Yep, on kidsfoodbasket.org. And I have right here a card, there's 4 ways you can help.
And you just look up Kids Food Basket, and you go to their website, and they will give you plenty of information if you'd like to volunteer. Now, you still do volunteering on Saturdays? I used to remember all this.
You can volunteer in the evening, on Saturdays. We have off-site things, like if you've got a whole church or a whole school or a group.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have all different wonderful ways to volunteer.
And I know many people that did do that, and they were able to say it's a process. You make it. It's a lot. I mean, you do have this down.
We got it down.
And can you donate towards your organization, maybe food?
Sure.
We have check it out.
And we have people who do food drives. We try to focus on 3 or 4 things at a food drive. So, but we might ask somebody to get like applesauce, little boxes of raisins, bags, granola bars. But if you keep it don't give a huge list, then you get more of one thing. And we, if you got 10,000 granola bars going out the door every day,
right?
We always need them.
All right, we want to thank Mary Kay Hoodhood for being here today, talking about Kids Food Basket and how she founded it, why she founded it, and how it's impacting West Michigan. And we will be finishing up this interview right now, and then we're going to do part 2, and we're going to be talking about her new book to kind of give people hope. And maybe you're in a situation of thinking that you don't know what your life can be until you really try, basically.
That's right.
All right, we want to thank you. This is Pamela Keim from Grandtapmedia. We want to wish everyone a fabulous day. Check out the interview and check out part 2 on our YouTube channels. Thank you so much, Mary Kay, for being here.